Okay, then Tammy Jo, would you take roll, please?
Certainly. Ms. Sherling,
I am here.
Mayor Judd, Mr. Grubb,
Here.
Mr. Campbell, Mr. Bowerboom,
Here.
Mr. Hendrickson, Mr. Olson,
Here.
Mr. Breitling, Ms. Mojo,
Here.
Ms. Preston,
Here.
Mr. Zimmerman,
Here.
and Mr. Peterson.
Here.
All right, looks like you have a quorum.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. Appreciate your attendance today. You have before you the agenda. Is there any changes or additions to that agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Thank you. Is there a second?
Bruce Grubb, second.
Thank you. And who made the motion, please? Thank you, Dwayne. Is there any further discussion? All those opposed say aye. And the motion carries. And we have the minutes from the August 26th, 2020 meeting. Any changes or corrections to the minutes? Or a motion to approve?
Bruce Grubb, motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Nathan Boardroom, second.
Thank you, Nathan. All those opposed say aye. And the motion carries. Item number 4, Eric, you want to talk about property acquisition status report? Item
Yes.
B, pages 6 through 16 in your report.
Yes, thank you. As noted, item B, page 6 in your report is the beginning of the monthly property status report. I'd maybe just point out a few items in here for your awareness and consideration. Page 6 is the standard cover page, really no updates or nothing unique on that. Page 7 does show the overall acquisition status. And as you can see on the left-hand side in the legend, we have acquired over 400 parcels now. At the time that this map was produced a week or so ago, we were at 406 parcels acquired, and so we continue to make progress. I believe last month we were at like 395, and so we've acquired a handful of new parcels in the past month. You'll also notice in purple, we do have 8 purchase agreements signed. And I do know that there has been a handful more that have been signed since this report has been produced. So again, evidence that we are making some progress. As you may also be aware, we have had negotiations stall out on a handful of properties, and so we have visited with the Cass County Commission and asked them for permission to utilize eminent domain actions if we're unsuccessful to negotiate. And so at the time this report was produced, we had filed 6 condemnation for acquisition filings, and so you can see that in sort of a reddish color on the map as well. Turn to page 8 is a map. I think we mentioned this last month. This second map, I guess third map in your packet here, does focus on the environmental monitoring easements. So this is the biotic and geomorphic monitoring program that's part of the Corps' adaptive management strategy. As you can tell, we do have the EME stands for environmental monitoring easements in the legend. And so over the course of 2020, we were able to secure over 200 of those easements. We do have rights of entries on 166 parcels. Ultimately, we will need to get easements on all of those parcels, and we have hired an appraiser to do the valuation of that. But the right of entry is allowing the Corps' field crews to do the monitoring work, and they've been out in the field for the last few months doing that. So that orientates you with the status there. The next handful of pages just show you the status in each individual section. The status here lines up with the maps that we just went through, but this drills down a bit deeper. If you have any questions, I guess happy to answer those. One thing maybe I would just point out is we are continuing to show on some of the graphs, for example, on page 12, we have $2.8 million worth of asset property. And then on page 13, there's $5.3 million worth of asset property that's kind of scattered throughout the locations. You can generally see that we have assembled a fair amount of asset lands that we don't believe are going to be needed for the project. And most of those, in fact, all of those have been acquired when a property owner has asked us to buy more than what we need. And that's part of our sort of fair, friendly, and flexible approach is to buy more if they're willing. That being said, ultimately, we do anticipate wanting to dispose of those lands after we've fully concluded that there is not a need for this project or some other public purpose that could use those properties. And so we are working on a plan to dispose of those remnant parcels. We'll bring forward that plan through the committee here when it's ready. I wanted you just to be aware of that we are tracking that information. Otherwise, no other comments from me unless there's questions.
Great. Anybody have any questions? Well, I know everyone's busy, and I appreciate the joint board's work on all of this, as well as staff. Let's move on to item number 5, the Clomer Outreach to the upstream property owners, pages 17 through 31. And I do appreciate, I think it's helpful to have, to share your computer screen there so people can follow along. Thanks.
Thank you, Tammy, for sharing the digital screen with us. In your packet, page 17 is the beginning of the post-Clomer Outreach packet that we are working to send to all of the impacted property owners. I believe the committee has seen this in the past, but now that we do have the Clomer that was approved earlier this month, we are getting ready to send these packets out to property owners. Anticipate these hitting the mail next week. And so just wanted to make sure the committee was aware of that. I thought I would spend just a couple minutes walking through the content of this packet so you are familiar with what will be shared with the property owners. On page 17 is a cover letter from the Diversion Authority, so Joel would sign this. And it's basically a high-level overview of a handful of milestones that we've crossed. It indicates that it sort of gives an outline of what else is in the packet that the property owners will receive. And so you'll notice there are 5 bullet points. The first one references a milestone sort of table, which is shown on page 18. The second bullet point references a letter from the Cass County Joint Board. Cass County Joint Board is the entity that's buying land in North Dakota. And then it references some maps, both an overall map and project-specific maps. And then the 5th bullet point on page 17 is the summary of the informational packet. And so all of that material will be provided to the property owners. You can see that material in the sample packet that's in your committee meeting notes here. Wasn't intending to walk through all of that in any detail, but let you know that it is there. I would also just point out for your awareness, in the packet, your committee meeting packet on page 21 is a cover letter for Minnesota property owners. And so the message to Minnesota property owners is very much the same, but there are some nuances. In the North Dakota side, because the North Dakota engineer has approved the mitigation plan, we wanted to let them know that the boundaries and the mitigation zones are essentially finalized. On the Minnesota side, we pointed out that the MIC board is the entity acquiring property, and there are maps for Minnesota property owners as well. but the details and the finalization of that is going to be hinging on the contested case hearing. And so in your packet on page 22 is a summary of the milestones for Minnesota property owners. And you'll note there that the contested case hearing is ongoing, and we hope to have that wrapped up by the end of the year. We did coordinate with our legal counsel on that language, and so just in case there's any questions on that. Otherwise, the sample maps that will be shared with property owners are in the packet here, as well as, starting on page 28, a 4-page summary of mitigation programs. This will end up coming to the property owners in sort of a booklet-style packet. So I think the committee has probably seen much of this in the past, but happy to answer any questions or comments if you have any.
Thanks, Eric. I know it was well over a year, I think, that we had a meeting down in Richland County, and there was a lot of really great questions about this. So I think property owners will really appreciate knowing what their options are at this point. Will there be alternatives for them? I mean, whether, they can raise or protect some of their buildings rather than having to relocate them if they're on the fringe?
Yeah, good question. So what we anticipate doing as a next step, so we'll be sending these packets out to property owners here, like I said, next week. Probably in another month or maybe month and a half, we will have appraisers under contract to start the appraisals for all of the structures that are located upstream. And not all of those structures will be a full buyout, but we will be, at a minimum, we will offer a buyout to all the upstream structures. But in some situations where the structure is on the fringe, or perhaps the structure is high enough, even with the project, we will be able to use the appraisal as a starting point for consideration of other mitigation solutions, such as elevating the structure, or maybe building a small ring levee if the structure is high enough. And so there will be some flexibility for those structures that are on the fringe or on the high enough elevations. But we feel like we need to have the appraisals as a backstop. And so in the letter from the Cass County Joint Board, we do make reference to the fact that we will be reaching out to property owners who have structures in the upstream mitigation area, and we will be starting appraisals of those structures here this fall. I guess the other thought that we had there is a lot of people in the upstream area are sort of agricultural minded, or involved in agriculture, and this fall they're probably busy with harvest. And so hopefully we can get through a successful harvest here this fall, and then we can approach them during maybe not quite as busy of time and talk with them about the appraisal steps and go from there.
Great, thank you. Questions from anyone? Quiet group today. Let's go on to item 6 then, the Rural Impact Mitigation Program.
Yeah, page 32 in your packet. So lots of more material here, but last month, I think we just gave more of a verbal update that we had been working on putting some term sheets together and some details related to the forgivable loan program, and I think the request from the committee last month was to make sure that this committee is kept apprised of all the developments of that. And so in your packet is some material that we've developed with Onsted Twitchell legal folks, and this matches basically the descriptions of the forgivable loan program. We have shared some of these materials with a few property owners who are anxious and wanting to know how the forgivable loan might work, and so wanted the committee to be aware of all this. I think it's good information and details. Happy to answer any questions if you have any, but generally I think it's more background information on pages 32, 33, and 34. And then starting on page 35 is a sample mortgage And so the diversion authority would essentially be the mortgagee that would hold this mortgage. In most cases, it would be a secondary mortgage with the property owner. There are some provisions that are spelled out in there. And, then following that on page 41 is a promissory note. Again, I probably would defer to some of the experts at Onsted Twitchell if you have detailed questions, but I'm happy to answer any general questions you might have about these documents. So.
Thanks, Eric. Does anyone have any questions?
One thing I might add, just for your awareness, there's been a few questions from some property owners asking about tax consequences of a forgivable loan. And our indications are that the loan, when it is forgiven, it will become taxable income for the property owner. And so that's, there's a chance that the property owner will, take some issue with that. And we understand those things. We're not forcing this forgivable loan on anybody. But if they do take a forgivable loan from the diversion authority, when the loan becomes forgiven, which would be 5 years after they would start getting the loan, if they meet all the terms and conditions, we would forgive those payments. They would have tax consequences. And so that's, might be something that you may hear from some property owners. It's certainly not our intention to be penalizing them, but that is one of the provisions from a tax standpoint. We did talk with the attorney group who helped develop a program like this in Sauk Rapids. If you remember, that was one of the successes that we used to develop this. In their experience, they never had any complaints about the tax issue. And so I think most of those property owners viewed this as a really beneficial program to allow those businesses to reestablish in the community. And I think that's the overall backdrop and goal that we have as well, is to allow these farmsteads or rural businesses to reestablish with the potential to have their loan forgiven a few years down the road. And so if they have a few tax consequences that come along with getting a shiny new farmstead, I guess that's one of the trade-offs.
I see. Okay.
So Commissioner Sherling, I guess I have a question for Eric. When do you
Sure.
anticipate starting to reaching out to these farmsteads in the staging area, knowing that it's going to take a few years for these to get reconstructed or newly constructed?
Yep.
And we have hopefully 6 years out before we need to have all the structures cleared out.
Yeah, good question. So in the staging area, by our count, there's roughly 24 farmsteads and maybe 70 or so structure sites, total. As I mentioned a little bit ago, we are planning to start reaching out to those property owners with structures here this fall and starting the appraisal process. When we start the appraisal process on a farmstead, we also want to incorporate the reestablishment process. If that farmstead owner wants to reestablish someplace out of harm's way, we need to have both an appraisal of their property as well as the sort of estimate to rebuild what they have on a functionally equivalent basis. And so we look forward to starting that this fall through the winter with the goal of giving ourselves enough time. We've got 5-6 years before we would need to have everybody removed out of the way. And so that's our goal, is to start that as soon as possible. We've really been waiting, for that Clomer for a while, and that was a big step that sort of green lights a lot of this activity. And then in particular, because of the wetland project, the Drain 27 wetland project, we have already started meeting with one of those farmsteads that's impacted partially by the wetland project and will ultimately need to be a buyout. And so that's a pretty big operation. If you're familiar, it's a cattle operation just south and east of Horace, just north and east of the inlet structure. So that's a big operation that we've started the appraisal work on already.
Commissioner Sherling, this is Executive Director Paulson. If I could make a comment, please.
Yes. Please.
Thank you. I'll just tie into Eric's comments there a little bit as well. I've been receiving a lot of questions about the flow easements and when we're going to start to acquire those flow easements. And I think the intent is, now that we've got the Clomer and we have the clarity in our mitigation extents, that we move forward with these programs in an effort to provide clarity to both the folks that live there and work there, but also the folks who own the land. So Eric, maybe you could comment a little bit on the status of the flowage easements as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joel. So Crown Appraisals recently completed Phase 1B, which was an update to the sort of baseline report. And now with the Clomer approved, I have reached out to Crown and I've started to engage them on the scope of work necessary for Phase 2, which is really putting all the values to individual properties. I have a meeting set up with them tomorrow that has some late breaking stuff I may need to reschedule, but nonetheless planning to meet with them to bring that scope forward. I'd like to be ready to have a contract with Crown ready for approval at the October meeting, and that would really green light them to get going on all the work that they need to do. As you noted, we've been sort of waiting for the final boundary from the Clomer model as a big trigger point for that. One of the key members on the Crown team is an economist and a sort of statistician that's also a professor. And so I know, as I had initial conversation with them, they just were reminding me that his availability is a little bit more limited during the school year, and he's much more available during the summer months. And so I think there's a bunch of work that the Crown team will need to do before they have to engage this professor partner of theirs. But that's a couple of the nuances that I need to work out with those guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good questions. Appreciate that. Yeah, you're right. The Clomer has really been highly anticipated, and this is going to be wonderful to be able to move forward for people. The Red River Control Structure Real Estate, item 7.
Yeah, and again, this was probably more of an update. Wanted to keep the committee apprised. We've been working with the Corps as they complete designs of certain elements. They supply us with real estate drawings. In your packet on page 46 through 49 is the latest real estate request from the Corps. So there's a letter on page 46 that gives a little bit of background. And then on primarily on page 49 of your packet is the overall map that the Corps has supplied outlining the real estate needs for the Red River Control Structure. And this may seem a little bit, sort of mundane or boring, but I guess from my standpoint, this is a key step in the process. We get the details from the Corps of Engineers. They ask us to go acquire the lands that are identified. As you might be able to see on this map, there's a significant area on the North Dakota side, but also some area on the Minnesota side. And so this map gives you a little bit of some orientation of where the control structure will be. You can see the work areas outlined on the map in sort of a purplish color. The areas that we need to buy in fee title are outlined in green, and then there's some temporary work areas outlined in red. So lots of detail on the map. We have made quite a bit of progress on getting nearly all of the lands on the North Dakota side acquired. I think we've just got a couple of those left to acquire. We have not yet started on the Minnesota side, but we will be asking the MIC board tomorrow to approve a contract with an appraiser to get going on appraising the lands needed on the Minnesota side. And so it's really our first planned acquisition on the Minnesota side. All the other acquisitions to date on the Minnesota side have been voluntary nature. So wanted the committee to be aware of that. Happy to answer any questions if process details or other things if you have any.
Questions for Eric? Okay. Well, it's going to be really fun to see that when they start pouring concrete there and moving dirt. Crop insurance study update, item 8.
Yeah, I think last month I mentioned to the group that we had been working with Watson Associates on crop insurance. Since the last meeting, I can report that the Watts team is continuing to work on building the actuarial-based rates for they call it an NRS. It's a non-reinsurable supplement. It's basically an insurance product that UMA or I'm sorry, the Risk Management Agency does not provide any incentives for or any coverage themselves. It's something that we would develop and offer to property owners, but it's a supplement to existing federal crop programs, and so we can lean on the entire structure that's in place with federal crop insurance, and that the producers are aware of, and they have all their insurance agents that they work through. And so Watts is developing the costs associated with providing this supplementary product that would provide additional insurances for summer floods. And they're also looking at the costs of a prevent plant insurance program. So far to date, the Diversion Authority in our mitigation plan, we have committed to providing a summer flood crop risk program, and we have not yet committed to anything related to prevent plant, but I know Roger has expressed a lot of interest in studying that, and so Watts is working to put the details together and some costs. I've asked them to be ready to present at the October meeting of the Land Committee on the findings, and hopefully they will have their financial information ready by the October meeting. So just kind of wanted to provide an update on that today. I haven't confirmed with them that they'll be ready for October, but I'm certainly pushing for that.
Thank you. Questions? Or any comments? Anything you want to jump in here with, Roger? Or,
That's
okay.
Roger. Yeah, I've been at the meetings with Watson Associates and been able to give input, and I think I'm very satisfied with how it's going. And we'll see, how they're what they come with here shortly. So, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, then item 9 is the committee update for the DA board. Pages 50 to 51. Is there anything you wanted to add to that, Eric?
No, I thought that this is just kind of a snapshot summary of progress that's been made, and if you're willing to use this as a report out for the board meeting tomorrow, that was my thought behind developing that, I guess.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, you guys have been at this for such a long time now. It's getting to be like a well-oiled machine. And everybody knows what to expect with these reports. I think they've been very, 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 very good and very informative. So appreciate that. And then we've got the joint board, Cass County Joint Board update.
Yeah, Mary, this is Roger. I was not able to make our meeting last Thursday. I think Jake is on the board. I don't know if anything came up, Jake, that you want to mention here.
No, there wasn't anything spectacular that happened. We just keep plowing ahead.
I would
Okay.
just
So that's our report. We'll just keep plowing.
Okay, that sounds good. I know, you've brought a few forward to the Cass County Commission. That's been kind of a new thing for us. And Sean and Chris have done an excellent job of educating our commission on what our role is at this point. And I think that's really been informative, not only for our commission, but also for those landowners that are caught up in this, so everybody understands what we can and cannot do. And I think they understand that they can still negotiate even though they've gotten to that point. In fact, I think you have continued to negotiate with some of those landowners and have come to a resolution before anything further had to be done. So I really appreciate the efforts of everyone on this, but I know you're all working really hard and it's tough. And I appreciate the landowners that are going through this as well, probably first and foremost. So item 11 is the Minnesota Joint Board. I know you don't know, or maybe you did meet last week.
No, we meet tomorrow.
You meet tomorrow. Okay. Anything to report there?
I don't know if Kevin or Mayor Judd are on, but maybe just two items to point out there. One, as I just mentioned, we are going to be asking the MIC board to approve a contract to begin appraisals for the Red River control structure parcels in Minnesota. And then secondly, we have been able to get invited to the meeting with Georgetown on Monday. We still are seeking an easement from the city of Georgetown for one of their city-owned parcels. And thanks to Jerry Van Amberg with the Buffalo Red Group for reaching out and helping get us on the agenda and help move that forward. So looking forward to having a good discussion with Georgetown on Monday.
Great. And I think Jenny is on the line. I don't know if Jenny's on that board, but I thought she was on the line. If you have
I'm
any.
not on the NCCJPA.
Okay.
I'm not on that. I can't offer any. Sorry.
Okay. Well, appreciate you being here for this board. All right. Is Adam there for an update on MetroCog? I know we talked about that earlier, Eric.
Madam Chair, this is Joel again. Adam did notify me he was not going to be attending the meeting this month, so he'll report out next month.
Okay. All right. Well, boy, we're just humming right along here. Is there any other business?
The Twins are down 3-1 in the bottom of the ninth.
Okay. Well, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Is that Dwayne? I can hear way in the background saying so moved.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
Bruce Grubb, second.
Thank you, Bruce. Then we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone. See you
Thank you.
tomorrow.